What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. We're back again for another THI podcast. A bit of a breaking news podcast, as we're obviously here to discuss North Carolina making the NCAA tournament by a very, very, very fine margin, as they're set to play in Dayton in a play-in game on Tuesday night against San Diego State. Carolina's an 11 seed in the South region. And again, playing San Diego State is another 11 seed as well. So that game will determine which team essentially gets into the field, and then that'll play Ole Miss on Friday after that as well. So still some work for Carolina to do to really get into it. And we'll talk about San Diego State a little bit later on and talk about some more stuff regarding the tournament field. But AJ, I want to start with this because I was personally surprised that North Carolina got in. And it was funny because I spent a lot of the day, going on Twitter and, reading stuff you put out, reading stuff other outlets put out, and, bracketologists put out, trying to figure out, okay, is Carolina, when the selection show comes around 6:00, is Carolina going to get in or is Carolina not going to get in? And there were cases for both sides. I personally thought, and I think you'll probably agree with this based on some stuff that you wrote and put on our website and just from talking to you off camera, that it feels like Carolina's resume to not get in was stronger than the reasons Carolina should have got in. And I can go through some of that stuff later, but were you surprised when Carolina got in the field, and how much of Carolina getting in the field, because I do think they deserve credit for this, and this played a big factor, was the fact of how they ended the regular season and also their run to the semifinals in the ACC tournament?
Well, I haven't hid the fact that I really thought they needed to win the ACC tournament to get in.
I did too.
And a big part of my reasoning, as I've said and repeated many times in the press room in Charlotte to people I was like, I'm the last guy thinking this. So I was obviously wrong on that, but I thought that the committee would go so far out of its way to not give the appearance of favoritism or impropriety or whatever, because Bubba was the head of the selection committee, that Carolina had to do more to get its way in. And I didn't think a win over Duke Friday would have secured it. I just kept saying, look, their best case is to get in. Then it's not even an issue. And I wrote about it. And some people perceive that as rooting against Carolina getting
Which we're not. Let's just make that clear. We're not. That's not what
a lot of people immediately, some people said Jacob must be pissed. No, look,
I'm a Carolina hater for some reason. I don't really know why. I haven't been able to. I've literally praised them for 3 weeks when they made the run at the end of the regular season, but somehow.
Let me throw this out there right now and make it very clear. We would be doing every person who clicks on one of our articles or one of our videos an absolute disservice if we weren't completely objective. Mm-hmm. So I root for the storyline sometimes. I always tell people I root for no typos, because a lot of people back home think, oh, you guys won, you guys lost. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't take any shots. I didn't make any tackles, that kind of thing. And I also root for sometimes what's easiest with travel. That's why I was dreading the idea of going to Dayton, because I got to get up and fly tomorrow morning. And we got media stuff Monday afternoon. Okay. That's what we got to do. It'll be a new, different experience I can just add to what I've done for so many years. So it's really, truly a blessing. It's just sometimes it can be an irritant. But I truly did not think, when you look at the resume, that Carolina was going to get in, and didn't really think they belonged in, if the net and quad one stuff is so important. I will tell you this. I've had conversations with Bubba Cunningham. I've been in some little groups where Bubba's talked about it a lot over the last couple of years, about the over-reliance on net and quad stuff. And he didn't think it was a great system. Doesn't think it's a great system. And perhaps there was influence, because he is head of the committee, that they look at other factors a little stronger than they have before. It's like a jury. A jury of your peers may convict a guy in the same case, and another jury may not convict them. That's part of the human element in this whole process. So I believe that what got them in, and of course they didn't say it when they had a chance on CBS, they should have said why. Don't give us all this crap about UAB. That doesn't validate Carolina being that team that's kind of waiting to see what UAB does. I believe it's the last 10 games, how you play. That used to be a big factor back in the old RPI days, how they finished the season. Well, Carolina won 8 of its last 10. Average margin of victory, 17 points. The Tar Heels were dominant on the glass for the most part in those games. And the 2 losses were to the best team in the country, maybe not the number 1 team in the field, probably the number 2 team. They led by 7 in the second half of one. They turned a 24 deficit down to 1 point in the other game and made Duke sweat. And quite frankly, maybe the committee's like, well, God, we would have put him in if they won, and we don't want a lane violation to keep him out. Maybe a lane violation, some people say shouldn't have been called. I don't know. I think if it happens, you call it. If a guy's offside, you call the offside, right? So, and we'll get on to Jay Witt in a little bit here. So that must have been it, because the metrics don't point in their favor. They have 2 wins over teams that are in the field. UCLA and American won the Patriot. They're 1-10 against the top 40 of the net. However, some factors here, and I put it in the piece that I wanted. I made the piece free because I wanted people to see it. 11 of those 13 quad 1 games were away from Chapel Hill. All right. Carolina went 21-1 against quads 2, 3, and 4. So they didn't prove that they could beat really good teams, but they didn't prove that they were bad and lost to crap teams. And these other teams had crappy losses. Carolina's worst loss was at home to Stanford. Stanford won 19 games, and they beat them at the buzzer. So other than that, losing at Pitt's a quad 1 loss. Losing at Wake, that's a quad 1 loss. One was the records, the scoreboard says 1 point. I'm sure the guys in the committee didn't know it was 10 points with a minute left. And I don't think they cared. They still cut it to 1 point. So I think the last 10 and the eyeball test, because let's be honest, if you've watched this team the last 5 weeks, they're absolutely an NCAA tournament team.
Yes.
And don't be surprised they stick around for a while.
Wouldn't surprise me, man.
Do not be surprised they stick around for a while. And we'll hit on that too. There is a precedent for 11 seeds doing lots of damage and also coming out of Dayton and doing some damage. So I would love to have the opportunity to ask some questions about why them and not others. But maybe it's no horrible blemishes and they finished strong and they were a lane violation perhaps away from being a lock. I don't know. Yeah.
And just to clarify, I think the reasons 2 things can be true at the same time. You can ultimately kind of review North Carolina's resume from a neutral perspective and say, for a lot of those reasons you just listed off and more, I could sit here listing off too. I'll give you another one. Carolina 1-6 against teams who finished above them in the ACC. Their only win was against Wake Forest in the ACC tournament. You've said, and again, I could sit here and give you a reason why North Carolina should get in the tournament. And a few of them you just mentioned, you finished number 36 in the net. I know when you looked at the bubble teams that Carolina was up against supposedly going into Selection Sunday, Carolina's metrics in most of those categories were better than the other bubble teams. So again,
what metrics though? It depends on how you look at it. It's the net, the KenPom, the BPI. It's stuff that I don't. Again, I think the overall number next to them, the number to their left. And give me your take on this, because there's such a heavy emphasis people have put on the 1-12.
Yeah.
But where does that 1-12 derive from? The number to the left of you, number 36. That's their net. That determines what comprises the games that are 1-12, right? You're quad 1, you're quad 2, 3, and 4 because of the number to your left. And if the number to their left was higher, that means quad 1 is one. That's only one factor. There's a lot of other things that are thrown into the pot. Okay. Sometimes, if you don't have the greatest cut of beef, you put more seasoning and more spices or maybe some extra onions in there and the stew comes out great. So maybe their cut of beef that wasn't great was the 1-12, but man, the chef added the right amount of thyme to the stew and it worked out and nobody knows the difference, and voila, that's a great meal. Maybe that's what Carolina has going in its favor here. We've been so uber focused on 1-12, me included. I'm guilty of it. Yeah. I couldn't get over it, to be honest with you, because I figured I was trying to think of how the committee would look at it, not what I would do.
Same. That's
the way I've gone about all the time. Now, I have said, well, based on that, they don't deserve it, because everything I've been told is that that would be so important. And that was one of the things that Bubba wanted to try to work away from, not because he knew a year in advance North Carolina would be 1-12 in the net or in the quad one games, but because it's not a totally accurate depiction for anybody. You look at last year, Indiana State was 29 and did not get in.
Mm-hmm.
St. John's and Rick Pitino and the New York market, people talk about it's a TV show, and I agree, but they were 32 and did not get in, and they were 4-10 in quad one games. Now, there were bid stealers last year. That was part of it. There were really no bid stealers this year. I don't think Colorado State was one. I think once they got to the title game, they were in. They've been scorching hot. So there is precedent for teams above Carolina and with better quad one records to not get in. So I kept looking at that too. But they're in, and if the committee were to come out and say, guys, just watch them play, I'd be like, okay, great point. I totally agree, because I think they're one of the top 20 teams in the country right now, the way they're playing. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you right now, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're like, good God, are you kidding me? You got San Diego State, who was in the title game 2 years ago. It's one of the best defensive teams in the country that's going to make you look ugly. Mm-hmm. And North Carolina. The Ole Miss don't want anything to do. If you're an Iowa State fan, you're like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
We have this great year. We struggle down the stretch, and our reward might be North Carolina in the second round. So I get that, especially if you watch them play the last few weeks.
Yeah, 100%. And I think because of how they played over the last few weeks is why I think ultimately they were picked. And I think in the long run, AJ, because I agree with what you said after three things. We talked about it, I personally didn't think Carolina was a tournament team. I definitely didn't think Carolina was a tournament team at halftime of the ACC tournament game against Duke, but credit to them for coming back and unfortunately losing the game how they did. But the fight back was there. Now you fast forward to where we are now, and you look at the whole resume, and you take the focus solely off the quad one games, because it is not a good resume when it comes to quad one games. 21-1 against teams perceived to be below them. That's a good record. Finishing the season like they do, winning 8 of their last 10 by, again, an average margin of 17. Those 2 losses coming to Duke, who was the number 1 team in the country. So it makes sense, and I think because of how Carolina ended the year, they are worthy of being a tournament team, but I didn't think the committee would look at the resume and say that. That's, I think, what we're trying to articulate there, because, again, like we've said in here and said previously, there are a lot of reasons Carolina maybe shouldn't have gotten the tournament, but when you end the year like they did and doing it in the fashion they did, I think they're a team that, as of right now, deserves to be in, and that's kind of my final say on it.
And I think America needs to know if the eye test matters. They did a terrible job. Obviously, Bubba had to defer, but it was a terrible job explaining. Oh, if UAB would have won, they wouldn't be in. That doesn't.
Yeah, that explanation was interesting.
That's a BS response. I want to know what it is. I want to know what it is, not because I'm saying they shouldn't be in. I just want to know the team that I cover, the team that we focus on 365 days out of the year. I want to know what the committee saw in them that put them in. If it's the eye test, tell us it's the eye test. But I'll tell you another thing. If it's the eye test, then we need to get ADs out of the picture. We need to bring Jay Wright. Shouldn't be on the CBS set. He should be leading a room of ex-coaches whose eye test I trust a lot more. No disrespect to Bubba Cunningham or any of those guys. And Bubba knows ball. Mm-hmm. Okay? I've talked to Bubba. He knows ball. But if it's going to be the eye test, maybe you have the people who like numbers over here and the people who watch ball over here, and you have them get together in Indianapolis on Wednesday of selection week, and they hash it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
They make presentations. Here's the pro North Carolina presentation. Here's the pro West Virginia presentation, and have at it, and then see what happens. That would be fun. That would be a great behind the scenes TV show. I think people need to know. They have a right to know. This is an amazing spectacle. It's an American tradition. And there is an awful lot on the line for those teams that don't get in, that are right there on the edge. Because for North Carolina right now, at this moment, think about how differently people view this team simply because they're in, as opposed to an hour and a half ago when they weren't in, when people were like, well, Hubert's really going to be on the hot seat next year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Still may be on one. Can't afford another year like this and keep your job if you're the head coach of North Carolina. Let's be honest. But people have a right to know. Mm-hmm. If you're West Virginia or Indiana, you have a right to know why North Carolina got in over you. We have a right to know why you didn't get in. Now, like I said, some of these teams had some bad losses, and that hurts. It shows that you can play down to a certain level. Carolina didn't really ever play down to such a low level where the committee's like, you know what? They just proved it too often they weren't. They didn't really prove that they were one of those teams, but they never really proved that they weren't. Even the ugly losses, Duke and Clemson are damn good teams. And I will throw this last thing in there too, because we can beat this into the ground forever. When I saw Louisville as an 8,
yeah, that was crazy.
Then I almost went in and deleted the Carolina makes the NCAA tournament story. We had an admin already. Louisville is an 8, winning 20-21, then losing to Duke in the ACC finals. That's insane. 18-2 in the league. Lost a couple of games because their starting center went down at the end of November. I mean, if Louisville fans have a reason to be pissed at being an 8 seed.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And Clemson's a 5, and I think Clemson's a really good team, but Louisville beat them twice. Just beat them the other night. How is Clemson a 5 and Louisville's an 8? There's a lot of inconsistency, and it just doesn't begin and end with the bubble. It's throughout. Mm-hmm. Well, Auburn, the number 1 overall seed. Auburn lost 3 out of 4.
I know.
Just won the ACC tournament without Cooper Flagg and Malik Brown. How in the hell are they not the number 1 overall seed? I mean, that's like splitting hairs. But my point is, there's so much inconsistency or strange rationale. We have a right to know what those things are. They should provide something for us so we can gnaw on it, talk about it, and move on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said with Auburn too. I mean, we're here talking, and a lot of our reasoning is, well, Carolina finished the season 8-2. You talk about Auburn losing 3 out of 4. I know they had a really good season, but why would Duke not be the overall number 1 overall seed? I know Carolina fans don't want to hear that, but again, it's the inconsistencies. I completely agree with it that you're talking about right here. And let me just read the quote just to give a little more context of what we've been talking about. It's 8:10 at night. I have not been scouring Twitter and articles and watching TV over the last couple hours to know if anything else was said in terms of reasoning is why North Carolina got in. But what I do know, and this came from Vice Chairman Keith Gill, who's a NCAA Tournament Selection Committee Vice Chairman.
By the way, and clarify whom Bubba deferred to, because Bubba could not speak about Carolina. Deferred
to Keith Gill when they were asked about it. And again, to quote him, quote, Memphis won the AAC championship, and that put North Carolina in the field. He added that if UAB would have won that game, the Tar Heels would have been the first team out. That is the only reasoning I've seen as to why North Carolina got in the tournament. But like you said, it's kind of a nothing burger. It doesn't explain why North Carolina was that first team in because UAB lost. You know what I mean?
He said they voted Saturday night. So Carolina was in the field when everybody went to bed Saturday night.
Yes.
So it's not like Carolina snuck into the field because UAB lost. A UAB win would have bumped them out. They were in the field. Mm-hmm. No matter what happened across the country today, when everybody woke up, if the bracket would have been unveiled this morning without relevance to today's games, Carolina was in the field. UAB, which played well for a while, and that was a close game until about 10 minutes left, and still was somewhat within range. Had they won, Carolina wouldn't have made it. But they never gave any reasoning to support Carolina. We've said it 1,000 times. Fans are owed this. This is such a big deal. People are owed this information. But they're in, so we should talk about Dayton, San Diego State, and their bracket. And by the way, if they happen to advance to the regionals, it's in Atlanta, which is very interesting.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's
a good spot for a North Carolina team to be, given the number of fans down there and the easy travel. So
South region worked out really well for them. Let's start with where they're starting, because again, Carolina's in the field, and I, like we just said for the last 15 minutes, I ultimately think because of how they ended the year, they deserve to be. San Diego State on Tuesday night in Dayton, that game time to be announced. I know there was some confusion initially. It was initially announced that Carolina was going to play on Wednesday night against Dayton, and then I know that was quickly kind of corrected by people inside Carolina, sources from not sources from in there, but Steve Kirshner, to shout out him, kind of clarified that. At least that was the first person I've seen.
We tweeted Wednesday, and I texted Steve, and it's because R.L. Bynum, who's on top of stuff, texted me and said, by the way, I think they're playing Tuesday. Steve's saying it's Tuesday, and CBS is saying Wednesday. So there was some hell of an outfit. You got to be prepared for stuff like that, CBS. Come on. And ask the question. Give us information. Anyway, I'm off that. Let's move.
No, yeah.
Let's move to
right.
Tuesday. And actually, I got to fly there Monday morning because we have media stuff, interviews, and there's an open practice. If you're anywhere near Dayton, you get to watch the Tar Heels practice Monday evening at that great venue, University of Dayton Arena. It's an awesome venue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It is a cool little place. Yeah, looking forward to that game. But just to focus on San Diego State, who Carolina is playing on Tuesday night, finished 21-9 on the season, 14-6 in the Mountain West. That was good enough for fourth place in the regular season. Won 10 of their last 14 games in the year. Ended up losing to Boise State in the Mountain West tournament quarterfinals. Just to look at their resume a little bit more, 3-6 in quad 1 games, 5-2 in quad 2 games. 3 best wins coming over Creighton, who was ranked at the time, number 6 Houston at the time, and Boise State. Those were those 3 Q1 wins right there. And again, a couple of really nice guards, second team all Mountain West, Nick Boyd and Miles Bird, 2 starting guards for them. So a good team and a team that they lock down and they defend, a really good defensive team. I think it's going to be a fun matchup on Tuesday night to watch, but a great opportunity, I think, for Carolina to advance to face Ole Miss on Friday night. So what do you make of, before we kind of look at the region a little bit more, what do you make of San Diego State? What do you make of that matchup on Tuesday?
Well, let me throw in, they beat UC San Diego by 5. UC San Diego's, 30-4 now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good team.
A pretty good club. They could shoot. They also beat Cal. If you're talking about common opponents, they beat Cal by 21. They lost to Oregon by 10, Gonzaga by 13. This is a club that when you look at the numbers, and they play a good schedule, the Mountain West is a good league. There's a tough travel in that league. Yeah. You think about, say, how San Diego State gets to Fort Collins and Laramie, Wyoming, and places like that. It's tough travel, a lot of tough home environments. You got to go play in. New Mexico's got one of the great environments in college basketball. San Diego State's got a really good environment too. Big fan support there. They're one of the top defensive teams in the country. They will make it ugly for you. They're going to get out there and strangle RJ. Go back to the possession where I think Hubert should have called a timeout against Duke the other night with a little more than a minute left. RJ's in front of Carolina's bench. He's being doubled. He's dribbling. Nobody's coming to help out the ball, which is a common problem for the Tar Heels. TV just came on. Common problem for the Tar Heels. It was on pause since I hit a ghost in there. Yeah, I hit pause when Carolina popped up on the screen, and then a little later I fast forwarded to Bubba's comments. I don't even know the whole bracket just yet, by the way. Full disclosure.
We'll talk about the South region at least here in a second.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't even know the whole South region. I wrote it down, I think, but I'll have to look at it. But as
AJ,
far as
just in, by the way, sorry to interrupt, 9 p.m. tip Tuesday night.
9 p.m. tip Tuesday
9:10,
night.
excuse me. Sorry, 9:10 p.m. tip. Excuse me.
Hopefully it also means the later interviews on Monday, just because you never know how crazy travel can be these days. You know from our group text how insane my travel's been this year.
Oh, absolutely.
So, God, nothing's ever on time. So go back to that possession, and you saw what Duke did to RJ. He had to give up the ball. Drake ended up attempting a 3 with 1:03 left, missed it. That was a possession where Hubert should have called timeout, I think, and reset the offense. What they did to RJ there is what San Diego State's going to try to do to RJ, especially since Carolina doesn't cut a lot. This is one of those teams that loves to bump the cutter. I like to call it, it's like the Brad Brownell defense. You bump the cutter, and you disrupt the flow of an offense by doing that. It's like a good football defense where if you're in press coverage, you kind of bump the receiver at the line, and you throw off the route some. That's what San Diego State does defensively. This is a program that was in the national title game 2 years ago. And they weren't a fluke getting there. They were legitimately very, very good. And one of the reasons they got there was because they defend you. They make running stuff difficult. Carolina could be forced into a lot of dribbling, which means the Tar Heels are going to have to shoot well from the perimeter in this game. Must. There's no other way around it. Shoot well from the perimeter, get buckets from different guys, force San Diego State to loosen some of their emphasis on RJ, because they're going to go in there saying, look, we can't let Davis beat us. If one of the others goes off, God bless him. But we cannot let Davis beat us. If he goes off, we're toast. If he doesn't go off, we got a better shot. That's going to be their plan. So the other guys are going to have to chip in. And so they're very good. I think the number 6 at effective defensive field goal percentage. And they've played enough good teams. That's a legitimate number.
Yeah.
So Carolina's got its work cut out for it. It's going to be more on the offensive end. If they can play like they did against teams not named Wake Forest here in the last 10 games and Duke at times, Tar Heels will be in very good shape, because They've been very good offensively because there's been a lot of touches, a lot less dribbling most of the time. They've been able to balance the perimeter and the interior, and they've hit threes. In the 9 games leading up to the Duke game Friday night, in that 9-game stretch, Carolina shot 45% from the field, from three-point range, excuse me. Mm-hmm. They hit 3 threes against Duke. It was all Elliot Cadeau. Perhaps Jay Witt's got some threes in him now. Perhaps RJ's got some threes and Drake's got some threes in them right now. They'll need them Tuesday night.
Absolutely. Yeah, and they'll need them to if they want to ultimately try to make a run in this thing. And it starts, again, with Carolina being in the South region. I want to talk about the region a little bit, AJ, and I don't know how much you've seen of it. I'm sure you've seen a little bit. It's been crazy the last couple hours. So I
think I wrote it down. This is, man, old-time stuff. I'm going to look at South region. Okay, I'm going to put my glasses on if you don't mind. So
yeah, go ahead, man.
If you have children watching, cover their eyes.
I've got it pulled up over here too, so I can start by just going through some of the basics with it. Auburn, the number 1 seed, again, a team that North Carolina played earlier in the season. So they're the 1 seed. Michigan State, the 2 seed. Again, another team North Carolina lost to earlier in the year. Ohio State, the 3 seed, and Texas A&M is the 4 seed. Just to look at some ACC teams in there, Louisville, the one that stands out. We just talked about them not too long ago. They're the 8th seed in the region. That's the only ACC team in it. And again, like I mentioned a few times, if Carolina beats San Diego State, they would play Ole Miss as the 6th seed on Friday night. If they win that, winner of Iowa State and Lipscomb, they'd ultimately play in. So could potentially be playing the 3 seed in the second round, which would be the 3rd game for North Carolina.
And what's interesting is then if, let's say, they advance to Atlanta, the other 4, their Sweet 16 opponent would come from either Marquette, New Mexico, which is going to be a war, an absolute war. And then you've got Michigan State and Bryant. So you could have a rematch with Michigan State. And this team,
a really good team, by the way.
This
really
team likes to talk about receipts. So there's a receipt game. That'll be an Elliot Cadeau receipt game because he missed that layup. For sure. And then a possible regional final with Auburn, which I wouldn't give Carolina much of a chance in that one. But, hey, receipts, right? Yeah. So, obviously, first things first, they got to get past San Diego State. I would think that Carolina might be a slight favorite in this just because they're playing really well for the most part, and they're scoring. San Diego State is not bad offensively, but their game is defense. Carolina's better on the glass. Certainly in the last 10 games been better on the glass. So I would think the Tar Heels would be a favorite and should be a favorite, and I would expect them to advance in this game, but it could be close. But they're going to need RJ to be RJ. And Jay Wood had 2 points the other night. You want to talk about receipts and a personal mission. He has a chance to be vindicated some here, and he already has been a little bit. And I wish people would lay off the kid.
Yeah. Yeah,
he's a good dude, and he is why one of the main reasons they're in the tournament.
Absolutely,
the turnaround was triggered by him. It was all of his juice that spread on to everybody else that got this thing turned around, among other things. But that was a huge reason why. So hopefully he's been vindicated. If not, he'll have maybe he has a big game in Dayton. They advance, and people forget, and it'll just be a small little. Side note to Jay Witt's career as a Tar Heel.
And just to give some credit to Carolina fans too, because again, we talked about it during the 3 things last time. It just, don't go online and abuse someone for making a mistake in a basketball game. I do. From what I've seen, at least on social media, I think the response to Jalen Withers has been actually really positive. I know there is always sections of it where it's been negative, and I'm sure it's been like that on message boards too, not necessarily our community, but from what I've seen on social media, the response has been good, and I think a lot of people have, trying to just show support for him rather than, put him down.
When we opened comments about 6 weeks ago on YouTube, one of my concerns was the craziness having to deal with that. Mm-hmm. And I've got to give props to the people on that were commenting underneath the video that we ran of Hubert and Jay Witt. Yeah, it was so positive. I forwarded it to somebody. I sent to somebody who's of note. To just so they know that there's a lot of positive support and comments geared toward both Hubert and Jay, because I thought Hubert was very impressive doing that.
Yes.
That was one of those moments where, you understand why the people that want to keep it in the family and really want it to work for Hubert do, because if he can get the job done on the floor, he's the right kind of guy you want mentoring these kids and that kind of stuff. I believe all that. I think a lot of that's true. And I think we saw in that moment why that's true. But I wanted to make sure that certain people over there knew what the public was saying because Twitter was more hostile than
as it tends to be like that.
I was really, really impressed at the YouTube comments. So I'm, again, reason number 437, I'm glad that we opened up comments on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. Even if some people come after us every once in a while, it's fine. It comes with the territory. We love it. We appreciate everybody watching as well. Throw that in there too. But yeah, man, we could sit here for another hour and look at the bracket and discuss everything about this. We've already been on here about 32 minutes. I mean, you looking forward to the tournament, AJ? I know Dayton's not the greatest place to go first off, but you looking forward to maybe potentially covering another run from the Tar Heels maybe?
Well, great places or bad places. It doesn't really matter where you go for the tournament because if you're covering it, you're inside a building most of the time.
Yeah, that's true.
So it doesn't really matter. So to me, it was just the logistics of travel because sometimes I like to complain. It is an absolute blessing to do this for a living. And when you get a chance to cover the NCAA tournament, 2 years ago, I got to watch the whole thing on TV for the first time since the 90s because I've always been covering it. Mm-hmm. And since now I just cover Carolina because even I haven't just been on Carolina. I mean, I covered Duke's run in 2004 because I've covered the triangle schools in Wake. When I was at the Wilmington Star News, when I was at Buster, I covered the whole ACC. When I was at Fox, I covered the whole ACC. So I've covered a lot of different schools and their runs, but I've been on it strictly North Carolina for 11 years now. And even before that, because Carolina's Carolina and they draw the eyeballs and they get the views. Fox always wanted me on UNC because UNC generated more traffic than Duke did, even in basketball. And when I was at Buster, they wanted me on UNC because UNC generated more traffic. So I've been along the ride with almost every Carolina NCAA tournament game since going back 2005 and some before that. So it is a blessing to cover the tournament. It's a different experience. The emotions of the tournament are real. And I've told you this a lot before, and I'll say it again. The most real human experience you could possibly have in my job is when you walk into a locker room 15 minutes after a team is eliminated from the NCAA tournament. And the locker room has to open 15 minutes afterward. Some people got on me the other day because we ran a clip of the question I asked RJ following the loss Friday night. And I said, what are your emotions right now? People are like, that's not fair to ask that. No, that's actually what you ask because that's what the storyline is. RJ didn't answer it. He was perfectly fine with what I asked because he answered my other questions. But you have to ask the question, especially.
Well, I don't understand. Why can't you ask that? I thought it was a good question. Why can't you ask that?
Because you don't know. That's where the story is, depending on the answer. With Armando last year, couldn't respond. Armando, with all of his bravado and his sense of humor, is in tears. RJ telling us that he looked across the locker room in LA and saw Armando in tears. He got in tears. Yeah. And Jay Witt's in tears. And Seth is in tears. That's the story. That's one of the things that makes the tournament so beautiful because it tells you how important it is. And it's an incredible fleeting period in people's lives that will stay with them forever. And I get to be up close and experience it. I will, maybe I'll go back if I have time, or you or somebody can find them. You could scroll back on our YouTube channel and go back and look at the interviews. I've sent them to you a while ago. When you first came on, I was explaining to you about this. Go back and look at the interviews I did in the locker room, Carolina's locker room in 2016 after they lost to Villanova. Go back and watch that stuff and then look at the ones in 2017.
Yeah, it's real, man. It's real.
To me, that was the greatest. That was the most personally enjoyable sequence of stories that I've had to cover because I felt good for those kids. I wasn't rooting for them to win or lose, but to be in that locker room in 2016 and walk in there and you hear Bryce and Kennedy out of sight, back in the showers weeping. And then you talk to Bryce and then you ask Kennedy about Bryce. I've sent you that video. Yeah. And Kennedy starts talking about how they wanted to win it for the seniors and he's all choked up. The emotion of this is a massive part of the story. So you're damn right. I'm going to ask about their emotion. Like, what are your emotions right now? What's going through your mind? Because that matters. It's not just put the ball in the basket. There's so much investment that these guys make into this that the people just see them twice a week on TV. Mm-hmm. Some of us get to see them a little bit more. And they get to see each other and experience the whole thing. probably 330 days a year.
Mm-hmm.
So if they lose Tuesday night, I'm going to ask that question because we know for sure it will be RJ's last game. It's part of the deal. And so, yeah, I look forward to it. I look forward to going in that locker room after a team wins. I look forward to going in there after a team loses because it's such an amazing experience. And for some guys that are moving on, it gives me a chance to pull them aside and say, thank you. I enjoyed covering you, especially the ones that I do. I mean, I enjoy all of them, but some you build a better rapport with others. The in-between stuff, the day in between, like last year, I tweeted out a bunch of photos of half the players playing cards because the media is allowed in the locker room for like 30 or 45 minutes. It's an open locker room. You can go in there and sit down and talk to whoever. There's a bunch of players playing cards. That was pretty cool. It just shows you how relaxed it is. This is a moment in time you can't get doing anything else, and they're getting it. And it's just really, really neat to chronicle and see their excitement of going through this. I've seen lots of dudes come through. Mm-hmm. And there is a common thread that they all have. There's a goosebump element that they all experience to being in that locker room when the first time they walk in and their names are plastered everywhere, or seeing the tournament stuff and getting up on the podium and their coach coming and giving that last speech before they run out of the tunnel after shoot around. There's so many different elements to it that we get to see and cover and experience up close and have a different perspective than people at home on TV who run to get a soda right before the game starts. And I'll never take it for granted. It is an absolute blessing, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else professionally that I could ever have possibly have done with my career.
Absolutely, man. Very, very well said. You got me kind of fired up. I'm ready to watch Tar Heels take on San Diego State on Tuesday night.
We need a lot more subscribers so I can get you and Bryant to travel with me.
Yeah, nah, man. I know. Let's just put it this way. I'd love to be there, but I'm glad I'm not going to have to be in Dayton on Tuesday night. There's other places I'd rather be than Dayton, Ohio on a Tuesday night at 9:10 p.m. But
but that arena's awesome. That arena,
yeah, you've told me that, which surprises me. I didn't see that.
That's a basketball hub, man. Dayton, first of all, I politicked earlier in the year. Dayton should be in the Big East. Like, what the hell is the Big East? They could put them in, bring them, invite them in. It's a great basketball fan base. It's a great basketball town. The Dayton Flyers have been a big deal for a long time. I have a very good friend who played hockey there and also is just a massive Dayton fan. They had good teams way back in the day. So it's been a basketball school for decades and decades and decades, and it's a perfect spot for something like this because the town embraces it. And what's neat is Dayton will never actually have to play in it. If they ever make the tournament, like whenever they make the tournament, they cannot be in the first four because you're not allowed to play on your home floor.
Wow, I didn't know that. A little fact of the day right there from Andrew Jones to wrap up this podcast. I love when I learn something new every day. I try to, so that I'll put that one on the list for today. I don't know if I'd learned anything before that. Well, I guess I learned Carolina's NCAA tournament fate today, so we can wrap it up with that. North Carolina, 11 seed in the South region, again, Tuesday night against San Diego State. Official now 9 p.m. tip-off, or excuse me, I can't say that, 10 p.m. tip-off in Dayton, Ohio. I think we can go ahead and get out of here, AJ. Go ahead.
One last thing. One last thing, and maybe we can do something. We'll focus more on this tomorrow, I guess, but either I'll do a video with either you or Bryant from.
Yeah, we'll figure something out tomorrow when everything goes.
VCU in 2011, UCLA in 2021, 11 seeds that started in Dayton got to the Final Four.
I know.
You've also got LSU in 1986, way back then when the preacher, Dale Brown, was running the show at LSU. You've got George Mason in 06. That started in Dayton.
Yep.
I covered that. They beat Michigan State and then Carolina. And I told you the story about I walked into Mason's locker room the day before the Carolina game, and there was no media in there. None. I walked in. They're all just, and they didn't have phones or mess around. They're just chatting. I walked in. They all looked up at me. I'm like, where's everybody? I said, well, who wants to talk first? And Tony Skinn, who is the Mason head coach now, I think was the first guy that talked.
Wow.
And sure enough, a week later, they're the national story. They're the ultimate Cinderella. Loyola Chicago was an 11 seed in 2018. And guess what? The Wolfpack last year were an 11 seed and they got to the Final Four. So the 11 seed has been a launching point before. It can certainly be one again, even if it starts in Dayton.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Wouldn't that be great if Carolina just makes a Final Four run just like State did last year, and then State can just takes the legitimacy and nobody cares anymore. If you're a Carolina fan, well, yeah, we just did that the year after, so it's not that cool. We'll see what happens. I'm sure Carolina fans would absolutely love that for a number of reasons. But yeah, man, looking forward to it. Again, surprised Carolina made the field, but again, like I've said a few times, just to reiterate, I think the way they ended the season, they ultimately deserve to be in it. Just next year, if you schedule all these good teams, just win a few more of them and don't struggle in these games. Don't lose half your Q1 games by 13 plus points. Take care of it early so we don't have to sit here and talk about these metrics for a week. AJ, I am so tired of talking about net and
I hate it.
There's metrics I've never even heard of, man, until today. I mean, some of the acronyms, I don't even know what they mean.
I want to take a blowtorch to the whole net system in quad one and take a blowtorch and just zap it from existence.
God, get rid of it, man. I look forward to the day when that happens, if that day ever happens. But I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones, another edition of the THI podcast. Appreciate you guys watching. I want you to do this. Give you a couple reasons to like the video. Like the video if you're glad Carolina's in the tournament. Like the video if you think Carolina deserved to get in the tournament. And also like the video if you think Carolina's going to win on Tuesday night against San Diego State. I want at least 150 on this minimum. I'm going a little short there. I want at least 150 on this. And get involved in the comments too. Like AJ said, the comments are now open. We'd love to hear from you guys. Talk about Carolina's, if you think Carolina should have got in, talk about your excitement going to the San Diego State game. And we just love to hear everything. I love reading the comments because people give really good opinions and analysis sometimes on,
I've been very pleasantly surprised, Jacob. Yeah, I really have. Yeah. I get an alert on my phone, like on the email. And I will often take a few minutes here and there, just checking stuff out. And sometimes I want to go back and reply to something. I'm just so busy, but I have been pleasantly surprised. I kicked myself. I didn't do it a long time ago.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm the same way. I'm glad it's been really cool to see. And we appreciate it as always, everybody that watches and comments and likes and does all that stuff. So tell your friends about us too. We're trying to grow this thing, but appreciate you guys watching as always. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell too, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.